to the Shades of Entrepreneurship, where we interview entrepreneurs to inspire the future entrepreneur. I'll be your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. So grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. This is your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. Today, I'm here with the CEO of the StubGroup, John Horn. John, how are we doing?
Gabriel, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. In fact, John, folks, is calling from the great state of Texas. I was talking to John. We're telling him about, that's actually from the parents reside from the old Texas area down in the valley. But before we get into all of that, John, go ahead and introduce yourself. Who is John Horn?
Yeah, so I am a husband and a father. I like to say that first because that's the biggest joy of my life. So I got two little boys. 3-year-old, 2-year-old right now, and a third one on the way, actually. And I am also the CEO of StubGroup, as you mentioned. And so what I get to do all day, every day is help businesses with their digital marketing. So we provide a variety of services. We'll probably talk mostly, I'm guessing, about Google Ads as part of our conversation today, but also other services as well, really just helping businesses use technology, use this thing we call the internet to find new customers, to ultimately make more money, and to do that in a way that is profitable and not just adding to the bottom line of the Googles or the Metas or the other platforms out there.
It's interesting. You just kind of hit on something in particular is the Google ads, the Facebook ad. I think the difficulty of that in particular is like understanding it all. But before we get on that, take a step back. Give us a little bit. How did you kind of get into this, StubGroup, learning about the Google ads? And you've been doing it for some time. So give us a little background. Where did your career start?
Yeah, it's been a journey. So, early days, I did different things, did some blue collar work, I did some white collar work, but really the journey to where we are today started, I think, about 12 years ago at this point. And it started with a StubGroup. Specifically, there were two guys who came together. One was a brother of mine, and one was a long-term friend of his. And they said, hey, there's this need in the digital advertising space. There's so many businesses moving over from traditional advertising, TV, radio, et cetera, over to this thing called the internet. And they know they need to advertise, but they're not sure how, and they need help with that. And so that's where StubGroup was born. And I was brought on as employee number one, and we got to work together to build this thing. And early days, it was just like, okay, how do you do it? How do you run Google Ads? So we figured it out. We ran Google Ads for our own business to then get business ourselves, say, hey, you need a Google Ads agency. We ran our own ads, got our business, then helped them. And then just really, figured it out, grew from there, started adding talent to our team and adding clients along the way. And 12 years later, we're still helping clients be successful with Google Ads and other platforms.
It's very interesting because it was such a first mover kind of thing, right? There was no such thing. Now, with that being a first mover in the market, how do you mentioned, we went through, we started learning about Google Ads. How do you do that if you're the first mover?
So back in those days, it was definitely not a mature marketplace, but there definitely were a lot of businesses who were already using Google Ads. Google Ads had been out for a while, and so a lot of people were already seeing success from it. There were already, large agencies that were providing services, but there was just so much of a market need that there were many more, businesses and clients who needed really good help, and help that wasn't just understanding the technical side of things and the platforms, but they could also think from a business perspective and marry that with, business models and marketing. Because that's one of the biggest problems in our industry is you'll have people who might be really, really technically sound, let's say at Google Ads, and they know what buttons to click, what best practices to say yes to say no to that Google's trying to push you into, stuff like that. but they don't always marry that with really an understanding of how businesses operate and how your specific unique business operates, what sets you apart from your competition, what your niche is, what your edge is. And so a good agency, which is what we aspire to be here at StubGroup, is connecting that technical understanding of things with that business understanding of things so we can operate at a higher level to actually succeed for you, where a lot of agencies are just clicking buttons and it's not actually having the impact it needs to have on your business.
Yeah, and you know what? I again, folks, I think when you think about ads, it's kind of like in a supporting system to your funnel, right? Now, John, I would love to kind of hear, like, let's use an example. Let's say you're trying to sell a T-shirt. Talk about very simple, right? Let's talk about how an individual, an entrepreneur right now could leverage Google Ads to kind of get this individual from awareness of their product, right, down to being a loyal consumer. How does the Google Ads and how does your team specifically help support that?
Yeah, let's dive in. So first question is this even the right platform, the right channel for you? Because there definitely are businesses out there where Google's not the right fit. And there's a couple of things that kind of are patterns of that. So the first is, Google is a search engine. So if you're selling something that people aren't searching for because they don't know it exists or that they need it, you're going to have a hard time actually, getting business from that. And so, for example, t-shirts a great example of this, where if you are just, selling a t-shirt and it's not, a really specific t-shirt, maybe with a specific slogan, this is like, hey, here's a good quality t-shirt, you can buy it in bulk or whatever. Well, you're going to have a really hard time in Google standing out from the competition and getting traffic profitably. And so we might come to you and say, you know what? Google is not the right place for you to be to sell your t-shirt. Maybe Meta is the right place to be, or maybe, like paid advertising is not the right place to be. You've got to figure out something that really sets your t-shirt apart. And maybe this is a local advertising play or something like that. And so, yeah, first of all, it's is it even the right platform? But if it is the right platform, so let's say let's maybe go up market a little bit. So, for example, we have a client, they sell scuba gear. So we've got certainly higher price points to work with, higher margins, things like that. And so we can say, well, people definitely search Google for scuba gear. It's where they go when they want to educate themselves about what the options are out there, what they want to purchase, and then B, identify who they're going to purchase from. And so our job is to figure out kind of where in that funnel to fit your advertising. Because really, even with search engines, it is very much a funnel, like you said. So you might have somebody who is at the very beginning of that funnel, how do I go scuba diving? Well, that's an incredibly different intent than someone who's searching for the make and model number of a specific dry suit. And so part of what we're figuring out is, okay, hey, someone who knows the dry suit they want, that's incredibly high quality traffic. We probably want to be all over that traffic because it's likely to convert. They're near the bottom of the funnel. Whereas we might say, hey, someone who's searching how to do scuba diving, maybe we don't even want that traffic because, yeah, it is scuba diving related, but they need to go through a lot before they're going to be dropping $5,000 on a new dry suit or something like that. And so that's where, again, that kind of understanding of your funnel as a business and who is your target audience, where are they in the funnel, and then where we want to start is we want to start at the bottom of that funnel. We want to capture that low hanging fruit that's most likely to convert. And then as we get that to work, then we can start scaling, work our way up in the funnel and kind of figure out where in the funnel is that waterline between profitability and now this is just too high. We can't really get this high in the funnel quite yet.
Yeah, I love that example because so folks are probably at home like, what do you mean you can't? Google and Meta, I guarantee you can probably market everything on. Let me give you a good example of an industry that is very difficult to do any type of ads for. Knives. Now, shout out to my boy over Burnside Knives, Rick. The difficulty with that, it's considered a weapon. And so when you're going through the Facebooks and the Metas of the world, it is, they have some restrictions on how you're able to market that and how you're able to. So again, as to John's point, you sometimes do have to look outside of even the virtual world to create that brand awareness. But with that said, And undoubtedly, Google and Meta are two of the most powerful tools in the ad agency space, right? From getting anybody out there. Now, you also mentioned, what I really like as well is making sure you really understand who your market segment is, and then defining how to target that market. Now, let's walk through that a little bit. Give me some examples of what should entrepreneurs be thinking about when you're thinking of target marketing. What should they be thinking about, not only when they think about how to create their segment, but then how to market that segment specifically?
Yeah, fantastic question. So there's a lot of different ways that you can segment who you're targeting. And let's talk through some of them. So for example, geography could be one. If you are a local business, well, you want to figure out, okay, how far are people willing to travel to do business with me? That's kind of a really obvious one. Or even if you are a national business, you may have better results in some areas versus others because there's going to be different levels of competition throughout the country. And so you might be like, yeah, I can ship my products to everywhere in the US. But you know what? Nevada and Nebraska, there's not many people in those areas servicing those for whatever reason. And so I'm seeing really good results there. And let's go double down and say, hey, we are the solution for Nevada and Nebraska, and create landing pages about that and things like that. So geography is one thing. Purchase intent is another thing. So, some businesses are really good at kind of educating and nurturing people through that funnel to then become a customer. Other businesses are saying, hey, I don't want to put the time and effort into creating content. I just need people who are ready right now. So a good example could be, let's take a roofer. You could have a roofer who's like, you know what? This is a big decision that people are making about replacing their roof. And maybe you're in an area where there's a lot of people who are actually replacing roofs, not just because it stormed and they got damage and they have to replace it right away, but they're thinking about, hey, let's put a metal roof on, or hey, how does solar impact our roof, or whatever. And so you could create content, video, lead magnets, things like that, higher up in the funnel as people are thinking and researching, and getting your name in front of them and saying, hey, we're here when you're ready. Or you could be like, no, that's not my focus as a business. I want the people who had hail damage last night and who are ready to buy today. And so that's kind of a different intent that you might segment your audience with. And then, of course, you've got things like B2B versus B2C. And so you've got to understand, hey, am I selling to consumers, or am I selling to businesses? Or hey, maybe I'm selling to both, but they have very different needs. And so I want to send them to different places, maybe on my website, because someone who's a consumer is going to be looking for, hey, what are your reviews from other consumers and how fast you get to me and whatnot. A business might be like, well, hey, what's your RFP process look like, and what other businesses use you and things like that. And so you've got to tailor your messaging to that. And then maybe the last kind of segment I'll pick here would just be price point. You might have people who you might have a product where, yeah, technically a lot of people need it, but only a segment are willing to pay the price that you're charging, because maybe your premium price point, your luxury, or vice versa. Maybe you're going after, lower income people with a really affordable message. And so you don't want to be showing up for people who are looking for those luxury price points, who have a completely different, use case in mind. And so there's lots of different ways to kind of tailor campaigns to all those different segments. And we could talk about some specifics here, of course. But from a starting place, you've got to understand what segments are we going after geographically, in the funnel, price point wise, et cetera. And then focus your messaging, your targeting, and your offers on that segment.
Yep. And I will give you guys a great example, specifically on the pricing in the kind of perception. I believe it was L'Oreal, or I can't remember what makeup brand it was, but back in the day, there were a pretty well-known kind of high-end established makeup brand. Eventually, they started selling, at the Walmarts and Kmart's of the world. And the perception of the brand actually diminished immensely, to the point where they no longer were looked at as a premium brand, but more of a cheap brand, right? Except their pricing was still at this premium price, and their perception was now much, much lower. And so they had to kind of reestablish themselves as a brand so they can get back to that premium level of pricing. However, they also had to bring down that pricing because they had to essentially meet in the middle. right? We're like, we know we're not the premium. I think it was Olay. I can't remember exactly what brand it was, but essentially, they're like, okay, we want to be in the Targets instead of the Walmarts of the world. And so that was one strategy they changed. They started, making sure that their products were next to brands and products they wanted to align with, right? So like the Ray-Bans, like I don't know so many makeup brands. I'm sorry, ladies. I'm sorry, but all these different makeup brands that are within that target sphere, right? That price range, and then they started doing well again. So again, having that kind of mindset and understanding of one, what is your consumer, who is your consumer, and what are they willing to pay for that value, whatever it is that you're providing, a service or a product, And so you also mentioned, how do you really begin to narrow down those targets? Because again, you're not going to, folks, if you're going to put a McDonald's outside of a gym, awesome, but I might not be the best strategy sometimes. Who knows, right? But think of, like, again, product placement. It shouldn't be a surprise to you when you walk into a store and some of the most highly purchased items, the first things you see. Right. And in fact, the things that are most commonly purchased, like milk, it's a reason that they're always in the back of the store, because they want you to walk through the entire store to get to it. It's very strategic. Now, John, you were kind of mentioning there's different ways to target different segments. So let's make it, let's try to create like an example of, let's actually stick with the knives. Let's stick with the knives. Let's stick with a lifestyle brand knife company. How would you target, first, how would you define their market segment? And how do you target them?
Awesome. So lifestyle knife brand, I'm going to immediately make the assumption that we are going after people who are willing to really lay down some cash for a knife. This is not the person who just, wants the cheapest pocket knife they can find because they need a knife. This is someone where this knife is really, you could call it a fashion accessory or a lifestyle accessory. They want it, they want to understand the story behind it. It needs to look awesome. It needs to have a great weight in your hand. And it needs to be the type of thing where you can give this as a gift to a friend, or a friend's like, oh, cool, that knife's awesome. How do I get one of those? And so already you're going to be able to take from those things information about how you want to message in your ads and on your website. So you don't want to focus on, hey, best price, like, get your, the affordability. Like, that's not what you want to focus on. You want to focus on how this makes you feel when you get this knife. You want to create the story of how this knife is crafted. So we might say, okay, let's get videos on the website that show how you craft these knives, maybe the story behind the founder and why he came up with it, some really high quality images kind of walking you through the process of the life of this knife. And then, of course, imagery showing people that I want to aspire to look like as a consumer with my knives out, skinning a bear out in the world, in the wild, doing things that look cool and awesome that I could picture myself doing with this knife. And so that's how you might want to kind of message things and create this experience on the website side of things. And if we're going to be using, let's say, for example, YouTube, let's talk about YouTube and Meta for a minute. So YouTube is a part of Google's platform. You run ads through YouTube in the same place as you run like search ads through Google. And this would probably be one of the areas where I'd go for a lifestyle brand to say, okay, well, let's identify audiences of people who kind of match our demographics. And there's a lot of things that you can do in the targeting side of things in these platforms. So let's make some assumptions. Okay, so our audience is mostly male. They're between, let's pick an age, 25 to 44, whatever. They probably have a little bit higher level of income because they need to have sufficient disposable income to purchase a knife they don't really need, but they want to have. And so we already start kind of building and tailoring this audience based upon those demographics. And then we start layering onto that maybe behaviors that Google is able to track. So for example, we could create an audience in Google to target on YouTube of people who Google sees going to other similar brands' websites. Now, it could be competitor knives. Maybe you want to go after that. Or it could be, could be a good or bad example, but Bass Pro. Maybe you're like, hey, people go to Bass Pro. That's my audience. Great. Well, let's create an audience of people that Google thinks are going to BassPro.com and who are searching Bass Pro on Google. And let's show them our ads because we know it's the right type of person who might purchase from our brand. And so you can do that, on the audience perspective, and then from like a keyword perspective as well. If we're going to run search campaigns and shopping campaigns on Google, I'm going to be very strategic with the keywords we target. I'm probably not going to target knife. I'm going to target, I'm going to think through, okay, what are people, and do some research. What are people searching for when they're looking for maybe this higher price point? Hey, made in the USA knife. Maybe that's one where it's like, hey, people search for that. They're looking for higher quality, higher price point, and then see which of those types of keywords actually work to drive sales, and then scale from there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, folks. I don't know everything, but I know enough to be dangerous, kind of thing. And I'm starting to get into John's world where I'm starting to understand, like, SEOs and the need for keywords, except not just, and I think historically, I would say, like, when I first started, I was very much like, oh, it's a keyword, one word, entrepreneurship, of course, duh, that's what I'm going to search. No, it's a true phrase. So, for example, you want to think about when somebody is looking for, like, the Shades of Entrepreneurship podcast. Well, what are they truly looking for? Educational podcasts or inspiring entrepreneurial stories, right? So these phrases, they're not just saying the Shades of Entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship, right? They're actually adding on additional words. And true to this, I'm helping a nonprofit here within Portland area with some of their content, and some of the things we're focusing on, like startup resources within Portland, Oregon. Very narrow geographical focus, because to John's point, if I'm going to be focusing on this specific geographic region, because again, this nonprofit supports the 3 counties within the Oregon area, so it doesn't make sense to market to New York and California and anywhere else. I mean, by all means, you guys can come and we'll happy to help, but you guys have to live in the 3 counties, right? Nonetheless, the focus is the geographical portion of it. And so utilizing those keywords, Portland, Oregon, startup, networking, events, things of that nature. And again, line them up, make sure they're all kind of in queue and it makes sense. Because again, you don't want to just throw out words that doesn't really make sense, because Google is like, well, I don't know what the hell you're saying, right? Now, you also mentioned, John, kind of understanding, like, where some of this traffic is going through. One thing I've started to find extremely valuable, because it's a free service, folks. I'm not selling it, but I see John's sign in the back, Google Analytics. One of the probably the strongest tool that you could have, and it's free. Tell us a little bit about Google Analytics, and from your perspective, pros and cons, and how should entrepreneurs be leveraging that system or that software to their advantage?
Yeah, so Google Analytics, and what Google usually, they abbreviate it these days, call it GA4, because it's theoretically the 4th version of Google Analytics, and also because Google just likes changing names all the time. So Google Analytics GA4, like you said, it's completely free. It's just some code you put on your website, and then Google's going to give you a lot of information about how people are reaching your website and what they're doing on your website, which is incredibly valuable, because you need to understand how people are getting to your website so that you can see what's working and what's not working. You're like, hey, I'm not getting organic traffic. Okay, well, I need to start investing into SEO. Well, you need to understand, is that investment paying off? And you're going to tell that by using analytics to track how much traffic's coming to your website over time. Same thing for any advertising or marketing that you do. You want to understand where that traffic's coming from. And then you want to understand how it's using your website. How are people moving around? How much time are they spending on your website? When they fill out forms or place orders on your website, again, what sources of traffic did they come from? Was that someone who clicked an ad? Was that an organic result? Was that someone who came from Reddit? Whatever. So it's a really fantastic tool. Now, I will say that the current version of Google Analytics, I like it an awful lot less than the last version. I'll just be honest. Google made some very big changes between version 3 and version 4, where they made it a lot less intuitive to use. So it does take some time to kind of figure out in GA4, like, what things mean and how to go around. But it's usually worth the time to figure it out. And I'll throw another bonus kind of free tool in there as well that I really like. And this is called Microsoft Clarity. And it's a little bit different than Google Analytics in that it actually does 2 things. It creates heat maps for you. You can see where people are clicking visually on your pages, and it will actually record visits to your website. I can't tell you how helpful this can be, because you can look, you can watch, and you can see just anybody who's on your website on their phone or a computer, whatever. You can watch their journey as they go around. And so many times you'll see something where like you as a business owner, you know exactly where they should go, what the information is, because you built the website, you know, understand everything. But you see, oh wait, they're lost. Like they're clicking all over. Oh, they're clicking this thing. Oh, they must think that's a button. That's not, but it looks like a button. And there's so many friction points that you can identify, or things that are broken. You're like, oh, they tried to fill out that form and it's not working. Like I should go fix that. And that paired with Google Analytics can be super, super helpful.
One of the things you mentioned that I think is extremely important is the journey. One of the things I recently changed, folks, on my website in particular, is I removed all my social media icons from the top right. And now you're seeing them at the very bottom of the page. And the reason I did that is because what I started to notice is our eyes as humans, we tend to look at the top right, right? It's natural. So if they're the first thing they're seeing is my social media icons, they're probably going to click on that. Now I've lost them. They're off my website. They're on Facebook's or Instagram or YouTube's algorithm. They're no longer on mine. And so I've actually moved that to the bottom. And the first thing I have now is one, stream the latest episode, right? You can just click it and start streaming, right? Because that's what I want you to do. And then two, subscribe, right? And then it'll have the links after that. And it's now, I don't think it actually links back to the site. I believe it's actually shared links. So again, if you click on the links, it's actually sharing the episode. Again, something I want you to do, but you're not going to leave my website, right? So you're still going down the journey. To John's point. Now talk about why the journey and like understanding the journeys are so important. In particular, how do you create how do you create a story digitally, right? Because you want them to follow this storyline. How do you do that?
The part of it comes back to this understanding of your customers or potential customers and how much time and investment they need to make into learning about you before they convert, because that's going to have a massive impact on what you put in your website. So let's say, for example, you're selling a $5 widget. That's an impulse purchase. So your journey is just your landing page, really. People are going to get to your page and they're probably going to decide right away on that page whether to purchase. They're probably not going many other places because it's a relatively low barrier to entry there. And so your journey, again, is that landing page. So you want to make sure you're saying what it is you sell, why they should buy it, having customer reviews and credibility elements so they trust you. And again, saying exactly what you want them to do. Because a lot of websites don't have good calls to action. They just they write like a blog. It's like, oh, here's information about what we do and blah, blah, blah. And there's never like, oh yeah, get your free quote or purchase this product here or whatever. So those calls to action are super important. But then you might have another business, like let's take this lifestyle knife brand that we've created here. You might find that people really want to kind of look around on your website before making a purchase, because again, they want to understand like that story and what they're getting into. And so you want to think through, like you said, that the buttons, the options that you have in your header, in your footer, wherever, you want to make it very easy for them to go where you want them to go. So hey, you got a story? Great. Our story. That's the name of the page on your website. Front, middle of your site. They come here like, oh, who are these guys? Click our story. Oh, cool. Okay, here's the videos, the images, etc. What is our knife made of? Oh, cool. That's a link. I can just click right there and go check it out. Or, why do we make in the USA or whatever it may be? And just it can seem small, but even like, the difference between having like a list of links that you have to click and collapse and it's okay, about us and contact and whatever, those things, versus just changing that messaging a little bit. Again, our story, why you want to buy in the USA, whatever it is, just little changes like that in the messaging can help people walk through that digital journey. And then every page that you're on, you should always be telling them what you want them to do next. You should have these call to actions embedded where, hey, they read our story. Great. Click here to go, see our most popular knife, or click here to purchase, or things like that. And just don't let anybody get stuck on a page. They should always know where to go from there.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, folks, that's one thing I've been working on. So apologies in advance for the last couple of weeks. I've been working on the website and I feel like it doesn't matter. You're always working on that dang website. And it's just remarkable. In fact, one of the things also is we've kind of talked about a lot of the solutions, right? But let's talk about some of the solutions that maybe aren't as effective, specifically like outsourcing some of the work. Can we talk about what are some of the common solutions like outsourcing, as I mentioned, possibly to overseas, that may not be effective for most businesses?
Yeah, it comes down to the quality, as with all things, quality of who you're working with. So there is nothing, inherently bad with working with people who are overseas. A number of our team members are overseas because we can find the right talent there. But often what happens is you'll have these agencies, these companies where they get super, super cheap people who work for them. And I won't pick on any specific country, but there's a couple of countries that are usually kind of the obvious ones to go for this. And so what you end up is you maybe aren't paying a ton, but you're kind of paying what you get for. You're like, okay, I'm gonna cut corners here. Hey, this agency over here, they're charging me $1,000 a month. These guys are charging me $500 a month. Well, great. I want to save that $500. Let me go with this cheaper agency. And they don't think about the fact that, well, hey, maybe that difference in $500, if you got one more customer a month because this other agency was better, you make $1,000. And like that, people focus on the penny pinching. And usually that penny pinching is, cheap overseas labor, as opposed to saying who really can understand my business. And again, it doesn't matter where they are in the world. But what matters is the skill level, the skill set that they bring to things. And so that's where you want to really vet the people that you're outsourcing anything to, whether it be marketing, website design, etc., to say, okay, show me examples of your work. Let's talk through things logically and see if you can articulate to me what my company does. Because I don't want someone who's just, has this template they use for every business. They do these 10 things, they click it, move on to the next thing. I want somebody who's going to spend time with me to understand my business, what makes me unique, and then uses what they know about the platform to, craft a strategy that is going to work best for my needs.
Yeah, and folks, I will a cautionary tale as well. There's the shadow banning, right? Where you unintentionally, again, you're just trying to scale your business. That's what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, the Metas and the Googles of the world, they'll see that a lot of your social media content, you're logging on from Bangladesh or something, right? Well, they know you're not in Bangladesh or your company, but so they will slowly start to ban your content from being shared. So just be mindful of that. And what John's very much alluding to that. I don't know how many times I get an email that says your webpage is not indexed, right? And like all of these little things. Now, why did you start helping businesses navigate these suspensions and compliance issues?
Suspensions is a big deal in the Google world. So Google actually just released numbers for 2024. So last year, Google suspended 39 million ad accounts last year, Jesus. Which is 3 times more the year before. I think it was 12, more than 3 times. It was 12 million back in 2023, went up to 39 million. And most of the 39 million, it's a good thing they suspended them because there's bad actors, there's scammers, there's malicious people who are trying to run Google ads for nefarious purposes. And Google says, no, we want to keep our ecosystem clean. And that's awesome. Problem is when they operate at a scale like that, there are also tons of legitimate businesses that just get caught up in that. And what happens is when your ad account gets suspended, Google's saying, we think you violated a policy that we have, and you may no longer run ads with Google. And you would think that just common sense would be like, okay, well, we can go talk to Google, say, what did we do wrong? And if we did something wrong, sorry, we'll fix it. We can pay you money again, right? That's how it should work. But unfortunately, again, largely because of the scale at which Google operates, they won't tell you exactly what went wrong. They won't help you fix it. You're basically, guilty until proven innocent, yes, but you don't know what you're being charged with exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we came in. And we started doing this a long time ago just because clients we were working with were having issues like this. And so we started, okay, well, we got to help our clients. Let's figure it out. How do we help them get unsuspended? Why is Google flagging them? How do we work through Google's appeals process? Things like that. And so, for a while, it was just when issues came up with our clients, we'd help them. And then we started realizing and just seeing people reaching out, being like, hey, can you help me with my account suspension? I don't know what to do. And so we realized there's a real market need here. And so we just started diving into that along with the other work that we do. And over time, we built up an entire team at StubGroup that just focuses exclusively on helping advertisers who've been suspended get their ad accounts back online. prove to Google they are legitimate, fix any policy issues they might have violated, or show Google, hey, they didn't actually do what you think they did. Please let them back on. And yeah, it's become a big part of our business, and at this point we've helped thousands of advertisers to fix suspension issues and to stay compliant with Google's policies. And there's lots more to help because, again, 39 million last year. There's a lot
I'm
of
telling you,
people out
folks,
there.
for someone who's been down this train, it is an absolute freaking nightmare going through it by yourself. Because again, just to John's point, they don't tell you anything. And it's like you're trying to go down this rabbit hole, figuring out, okay, well, what is it on either on my shop that is not indexing, and it could be something easy as the SQU are not available, or you didn't do the colors or the sizes, or it's you didn't put the return policy I've had before. It's a lot of different things that you just don't really anticipate. But when you're building an e-commerce business or anything, on the virtual world, you do have to like cross all these boxes because again, the way your website has to communicate to these search engines is much different than the way you and I communicate, right? You have to be a little bit more specific. Even in like you're talking with ChatGPT or Copy AI or whatever, I always encourage folks first, before you do anything, kind of tell the robot what it is. Hey, you have 30 years experience writing. You're a phenomenal, manage them up. You're going to manage up your AI, right? And then you ask them to do the task because now they already know this is who I am. You created me as this, awesome author or phenomenal artist or whatever the case may be. And now they know and then you give them their task and they're coming with that mindset that, hey, I have this 30 years experience doing all of these things, and they're able to, produce something. Now, that's kind of very much like the StubGroup, right? You're essentially come to us. We're gonna turn your paint into Picasso, kind of thing. Tell me about the StubGroup difference and how can people benefit from it?
Yeah, so I would say some of the biggest things we strive towards are really the bigger picture thinking that we talked about earlier, which is we don't want to just be button pushers in your Google Ads account. We want to understand what sets our clients apart and help them figure it out too. Because often, a lot of businesses, business owners, they're not necessarily marketing oriented. They are a great fill in the blank. They're great at plumbing or HVAC, or they're a great attorney or whatever. They're great at designing products, but they're not necessarily putting themselves in the shoes of their potential customers to see, well, what matters to their potential customers. How do they search for things? How do they make decisions? And so we can kind of bring this outside perspective because we are not, so invested in the business as the owner is. We don't know all the nuances. We are closer to the customer who is like, okay, well, I want to buy this, how do I buy it, or whatever the case may be. And so we can try and help, capture some of that, putting yourself in the shoes of the customer on behalf of our client. And then, of course, leverage our very, very deep technical knowledge about the platforms that we're using, Google Ads, Meta Ads, et cetera, to be able to run campaigns that are efficient. And again, going back to, I think, what I led off with, like it's really easy to spend money with Google and Meta and so forth. The hard part is spending that effectively and profitably. And so you've got to know what campaign types are likely to work. How can we cut wasted spend from day one so that we don't have to, take a month to figure out that this is not going to work, but we just, don't get that traffic from day one, and things like that, where we can really shortcut the process for businesses and then just help them scale in ways that they just can't figure out on their own.
I love it. That's the kind of the goal, right? How do we help people scale? So John, for those folks that are interested, first and foremost, who's like the typical target audience? So who's out there right now for the StubGroup? Maybe somebody's listening, maybe they need your service. Who do you guys primarily target? How can they get in contact with your team? And more importantly, how can they get in contact with you?
We get to work with a really wide variety of clients. So everything from, if you're selling products through an e-commerce store, you're a local lead gen business, you're a national company building out a brand. Like, we work with a lot of different types of businesses, both managing campaigns as well as fixing suspensions, because unfortunately every type of business has to deal with suspensions as well. And so, if you're a business owner, a marketing manager, whatever, if you are either running advertising and you're like, I wonder if we could do better, or if you're saying, hey, should I get into it? what platform's the right fit for me, things like that. We'd love to talk and see if we're a good fit. And best place to reach us through our website, StubGroup.com. If you want some free stuff, go to StubGroup.com/free. We've got a bunch of free content on there to try to be helpful to businesses in this very complicated marketing world that we live in.
Yes, definitely. So my dad always says, free is a good price. Again, folks, John Horn will have all this information on the StubGroup.com, all this information on the website. So go ahead and subscribe to the shadesofe.com. You can also visit us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will have this video on the YouTube channel. For those Patreon members, again, a week early, you'll have this information. You'll have the video as well as a transcription. We'll have the link backs to John's team. So you guys will also have the information. You'll have an individual page. So audio or video, however you prefer. Now, John, before you go, is there any last words?
I love talking about all this type of stuff, talking about businesses, because that's my passion here at StubGroup, is helping businesses thrive. And so I would just say, maybe the final word is take 5 minutes to try to forget what you know about your business, pretend to be a customer or potential customer of your business, and just look yourself up online. Just like see what comes up, see how people get into your website, and just spend some time trying to figure out what that journey is. And you might be surprised by what you learn. Yes,
I love it. It took me several years for even typing out the Shades of Entrepreneurship for that to be on top of Google. Again, it's the podcast title, folks, and it took me years for it to get to the top. So it takes some time. John, again, thank you very much for this conversation. Folks listening at home, you can subscribe again to visit theshadesofE.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast on wherever podcasts are streaming. And more importantly, you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Now, John, I would love to chat with you a little bit more. For those Patreon members, you'll have this extra video content. For everybody else, have a great night.
Thank you for tuning in to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. For more information, please follow the Shades of E on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or visit theshadesofE.com.